Continuing with the application of fluorimetry. There are selected fluorimetric methods for inorganic species. Species like Al3 plus could be combined with alizarin garnet R, and we can see that there is a fluorescence wavelength at 500 nanometer with a limit of detection for 0.007. There are many interferences that we can see, and these interferences should be avoided so that we get proper fluorescence. F minus can be detected with the quenching of Al3 plus with a complex of alizarin garnet R. Its fluorescence is also 500 nanometer, and the limit of detection is very less, that is 0.001. Again, the interferences should be avoided. When we come to borate detection, that is B4072 minus, benzoin is the reagent through which it fluoresces at 450 nanometer with a limit of detection of 0.04. Beryllium and antimony are the type of interferences. CD2 plus, that is cadmium, could be detected with 2-orthohydroxy phenyl benzoxazole, where it shows in the visible region, that is blue, and limit of detection is 2 microgram per ml. The interferences is due to ammonia. Now lithium, SN4 plus could be detected by 8-hydroxyquinoline and flavanol respectively with the fluorescence of 580 and 470. 0.2 and zero point 0.1 limit of detection, and the interfering atoms can be Mg, F minus, PO4 3 minus and zirconium. Zn2 plus could be detected by benzoin with the fluorescence in the visible region, which is green, and 10 microgram per ml can be the limit of detection. Boron, beryllium and antimony and some colored ions can be seen as interferences. Now we may question, what is this interferences? Now these interferences, they affect the fluorescence. Hence interfering ion should always be avoided while doing fluorescence. That means highly pure component should be used for doing fluorimetric analysis. Continuing with the application itself, uranium salts could be determined by fluorimetry, which is used in the field of nuclear research. We always know that uranium salt is uranium-234, which has been used in the field of nuclear chemistry. Now, whether this is present or no, it is present in a very low quantity, hence it can be detected by a fluorimetric analysis. We have already seen inorganic analysis, inorganic ions which could be fluorescing chelates with non-fluorescent organic molecules. Like for example, we have seen Zn2 plus and we have seen Li2 plus, where we are making use of various type of reagent. So this is where we have seen Zn2 plus and benzoin, they combine and they give me a fluorescence in the visible range. So there can be complexes where if I want to determine ruthenium in the presence of platinum, how could we do that? That is, now ruthenium just combines with 110 phenanthroline and it fluoresces at pH 6. Platinum does not combine with 110 phenanthroline and it does not fluoresce. Now this is also true when we try to do determination of aluminium in alloys. It forms a complex with the pentachrome blue black at pH 4.8. Now if at pH 4.8 I get a fluorescence, that means aluminium content is present. Traces of boron in steel can be detected by making a complex of boron with benzoin. This is also true when we want to understand something about fluorescent indicators. In our previous class, we have gone through about the fluorescent indicators. The intensity and the color depend on the pH of the solution. We have already seen the effect of pH on the fluorescence, which is mainly used in acid-base titration. Organic analysis can also be carried out by fluorimetry. Now this can be analysis of aromatic compound, that is some kind of nicotine which is present in cigarette smoke. We can also detect the air pollutants. We can understand about the automobile exhaust. So this can be done through a fluorimetric analysis. Now we have already seen about the fluorescent indicators. Let us go through some more detail. Now eosine is a fluorescent indicator at pH 3 to 4. It gives a color change between colorless to green. Fluorescein is between the pH of 4 to 6. Again it will give colorless to green. Quinine sulfate gives a color change between pH 3.5 and it gives from blue to violet. The color change is blue to violet. To naphthaquinone, the pH is between 4.4 to 6.3. The color change is blue to colorless. Then there is 2-hydroxycinnamic acid. The color change is between the pH of 7.2 to 9 and the color changes would be colorless to green. Now these are some of the fluorescent indicators. Now what are the fluorimetric reagents? We have already seen our previous slide that aluminum, lithium, tin and zinc could be analyzed by forming a complex with alizarin, 8-hydroxyquinoline, flavanol and benzoin. Now these are said to be the reagents which are fluorimetric reagent. That means when these ions they combine with these agents, they give some fluorescence wavelength and they have very less sensitivity. Can we not observe that the sensitivity, that is amount of Al3 plus to be present, is just 0.007. Lithium 0.2 microgram per ml, tin 0.1 microgram per ml, zinc is 10 microgram per ml. That means very less amount of the compounds or the ions could be detected by these fluorimetric reagents. In pharmaceutical chemistry also fluorimetric analysis could be used. Now this compound called anurine hydrochloride is found in tablets and elixirs. That means it is a main component of tablets and elixirs in foodstuffs. Now if this anurine hydrochloride reacts with a potassium pericyanide in the presence of NaOH, it gets converted to a fluorescent component called as thiochrome. This thiochrome is fluorescent in nature. Now if this is detected, that is thiochrome is detected in fluorimetry, we can easily tell that there is a presence of a anurine hydrochloride. Now these are some of the compounds which could be easily converted to the fluorescent products. Now hydroxycortisone, if it is reacted with 75% of H2SO4 in ethanol, its emission spectrum is at 520. That is the combination of these components with these reagents, they turn themselves into fluorescent products. Nicotinamide reacts with cyanogen chloride and it emits the radiation at 430. Chlordiazopoxide, it is under the photooxidation after hydrolysis, it gives an emission at 480. Now we can see here that there is a excitation wavelength is less whereas the emission wavelength is more. That means obviously fluorescence and phosphorescence they occur at a higher wavelength. Cyanide ion can be reacted with quinone monooxime benzene sulfonate ester and it gives an emission at 500. Aluminium reacts with pentachrome blue black R and an emission spectrum is observed at 630 nanometer. Boron reacts with benzoin and it gives an emission spectrum at 580 nanometer. Though their absorption wavelength is very less, but their emission wavelength is high through which they could be detected. Now these were some of the applications of fluorimetry. Now next coming to the system, that is we always know that fluorescence and phosphorescence they go hand in hand. Phosphorescence results because there is an intersystem crossing. Intersystem crossing is nothing but conversion of a singlet to triplet state and back to the ground state. Now there should be always a two-order enhancement in average fluorescence intensity. If I have to observe phosphorescence, there should be less fluorescence. There should be lifetime modification. Lifetime modification meaning singlet to triplet state should happen. And there should be a delay between exciting sample and measuring the phosphorescent emission. So these are some of the modifications which are required to measure phosphorescence. Now, the principle of phosphorimetry goes something like this. Phosphorimetric methods are generally based upon the nature and intensity of light emitted by molecules in triplet state. On account of their long life, they are subjected to a deactivation process and when the substance is dissolved in a rigid medium, phosphorescence emission can be observed. It is unique in regard to frequency, lifetime, quantum yield and vibrational pattern. The correlations of intensity with concentration serves as a basis of quantitative measurements. This all we have seen in our previous classes. Now when we compare phosphorescence and chemical structure, phosphorescence is affected by the molecular structure such as unsubstituted cyclic and polycyclic hydrocarbons which contain NH2, OH, methyl group, methoxy group and carboxylic substituents which have lifetime in the range of 5 to 10 seconds for benzene derivatives and 1 to 4 seconds for naphthalene derivatives. The introduction of nitroaldehydic and ketonic groups in the structure diminishes the intensity of phosphorescence because they allow quenching. The emission lifetime tau is in seconds and in rigid media 10 raised to minus 2 to 100 seconds in fluid media. Now next is the instrumentation of phosphorimetry. Many compounds display the phenomena of phosphorescence at liquid nitrogen temperature, but few compounds show phosphorescence at room temperature. Generally, the prerequisite for phosphorescence would be liquid nitrogen temperature. Compounds showing phosphorescence are likely to fluoresce as well. Now, if there is a phosphorescence, there may be a fluorescence as well. Therefore, phosphorimeter must be able to distinguish between the two. This has been achieved by the means of rotating shutter which introduces a delay between the times during which the sample gets irradiated and observed. A spectrophotometer is comparable with spectrophosphorometer except that the latter must be provided with a rotating shutter device called phosphoroscope and a sample system which is maintained at liquid nitrogen temperature. Scientists have reported that rotating shutter can be eliminated by using a pulse technique in which a flash tube is used as a source of primary radiation and an electronic time circuit triggers the flash and provides a high voltage negative pulse at a variable time to the photomultiplier. By this technique, decay times as short as 10 raised to minus 5 can be measured. Now coming to types of phosphoroscopes. There are two types. The one that has been displayed on the screen right now is called as rotating can phosphorescope. It consists of a hollow cylinder having one or more slits which are equally spaced in the circumference. Can you not see that? There is an ultraviolet lamp and there is an excitation slit and there is a slit over here which is having a rotating shutter. There is also a detector slit. The rotor rotates it with a variable speed meter. When it rotates, the sample is first illuminated. That is, light from the ultraviolet light falls on the sample. It illuminates and this rotor at different times, it gives away light through the detector slit. While it is dark, the phosphorescence radiation passes on the emission monochromator and it is measured. So this is how rotating can phosphorescope works. The next instrumentation is called as the Becquerel or rotating disc phosphorescope. It has two discs which are mounted on a common axis turned by a variable speed motor. Both the discs have equally spaced openings. Now there are two discs over here. They have rotating can and they have these two discs which have got equal. Now this is an excitation monochromator. This is an emission monochromator. Now they have the same kind of circumference. On moving the Becquerel disc, that means this Dewar flask which is having a Becquerel disc, the sample is first illuminated. Now can we not see that there is a sample cell? When this goes on rotating, there would be some sample onto which the light is flashed upon and then it is darkened. Now the phosphorescence radiation passes through the emission monochromator. Then it passes through the emission monochromator and is measured. A disc can be cut into greater number of openings as compared to rotating and therefore it can measure shorter decay times. Because this can be continuously rotated by this motor, we can actually measure shorter decay times. In spectrophosphometers which look like this only, Quartz tubes are used for samples. Now this sample cell, it is consisting of quartz tube. The solvent used in this must which solidify to a clear rigid glass at liquid nitrogen temperature. Whatever solvents we try to make use in the phosphorescent experiment, we have to see that it gets completely clear and rigid at liquid nitrogen temperature when placed in the Dewar flask. A most useful solvent is EPA, that is ethyl ether isopentane and ethanol. The combination of the solvent for the samples is EPA, ethyl ether isopentane and ethanol in the volume ratio of 5:5:2. This is how it has to be measured.